By early 1964, William Kaiser was ready to introduce Thin Bit. The office and shipping area were in an attic over the 900-square-foot house on Weiser Park. William and Hazel Kaiser worked out of the garage and attic on Weiser Park Avenue until March 1980. In March 1980, the business was moved to Sherman Boulevard. It was a small building, but compared to the garage and attic, it was huge. I joined the company on a full-time basis at that time. And then came the flood of 1982. In March 1982, Kaiser Tool Company was located at 701 Sherman Boulevard, just north of the Van Buren Street Bridge and the St. Mary's River. That previous winter, there had been a lot of snow. It was a particularly bad winter. Unfortunately, in the middle of March, spring decided to come, fast and furious, with warmer temperatures and lots of rain. Between the snow melting at a very fast rate all along the drainage areas of the city's 3 rivers and the downpour of rain, there was no place for the water to go except onto land. On Saturday, March 13, 1982, Doug Perry stopped by the building to make sure everything was okay, and it was. The river was rising, but everything was contained. That was soon to change. At dawn on Sunday, March 14, 1982, Doug and I received a call from our security system company saying that there were problems. We drove toward Kaiser Tool Company, but were stopped at Schenkel & Sons Construction on St. Mary's Avenue. The water was too high to try to drive through. Putting on wading boots up to the hips, Doug and I slowly walked toward Kaiser Tool Company. The water at times was up to my thighs, and it was cold. When Doug and I arrived at the building, it was still dry, but the garage, where shipping supplies, balsa wood, and miscellaneous equipment were stored, had approximately 3 to 4 feet of water. That water was inching toward the main building. Doug located a backhoe from Schenkel & Sons and walked out to their location on St. Mary's Avenue and drove it in. I got a hold of maize, stone, and sand and had 168 tons of dirt delivered to the building by the Buzzard brothers. Needless to say, it was a blessing that these companies were taking phone calls, or Kaiser Tool Company would have been in a far worse trouble. I also called in Dave Smith and a few other people. The company only employed a total of 8 people. Meanwhile, Doug started tearing down the chain link fence surrounding the building and began using the dirt to build a dike around the building. By early afternoon, Dave had arrived, and between Doug and Dave, the dike continued to be built. The water by now had started to come into the building at various points. I was kept busy with the wet-dry vacuum trying to keep ahead of the water. The dike was finished just in time. As it was being closed off, the water was starting to get ahead of the vacuum. The dike that was built with the 168 tons of dirt went all around the building and was 3 feet tall. The water was to the top of the dike. Late that night, the water had not risen any further, so Dave decided to stay in the building with his canoe, and Doug and I went home for a few hours' rest. However, the only way for Doug and me to get back to our car was for Doug to drive the backhoe and for me to ride in the scoop. It was a scary trip. The water was over 6 feet deep at spots, cold, dark, and fast-moving. It was good to get back to the car. By Monday, March 15, 1982, the pumping station on Osage Street that had caused the problem on Saturday night and Sunday was repaired, and the water receded. The garage, however, was a mess. Everything was covered with a muddy slime, all our plastic shipping boxes, etc. In addition, we had just completed making a huge supply of balsa wood, which sucks up water really well. It was floating all over the place. By this time, the water in the St. Mary's had risen dangerously high. It was disconcerting to stand in the building and look at all that water rushing down the river. Sandbag crews were on hand beginning Monday, along with city engineers. By Tuesday, March 16th, it appeared the battle with the river was being lost. The river had risen to the point that the water was barely able to get under the Van Buren Street Bridge. It was a scary sight. I spent time on the phones trying to get supplies of dirt and sand along with volunteers to the area. Then, when frustration was running the highest, Kaiser Tool Company was told that President Reagan was coming to Kaiser's Sherman Boulevard location. We were stunned. Soon after that news, the Secret Service arrived at Kaiser and took over our telephones. They used our phones to communicate with Air Force One as it arrived at the airport, and then with the limousines as they drove to Sherman Boulevard. Kaiser's employees were lucky, as they were the ones that tossed the sandbags to President Reagan. One person ended up in Time magazine. Within an hour after President Reagan left, the dike started to fail fast. We were told we had 30 minutes to get out in case the dike collapsed. We took all of our company records and dumped them into garbage bags to carry them out. We were told that if the dike collapsed, it would flood all the way to State Street. The business would have been gone. It was a sobering moment. We were exhausted, and we had all worked very hard. The business had been around for 18 years, and it looked like this may be it. Then, when all seemed to be the darkest, we saw trucks, a convoy of trucks, lining up to dump gravel, riffraff, etc. to shore up the dike. There were so many gravel trucks, they were lined up to State Street. These trucks had a police escort down Interstate 69 to get to us. Miraculously, the dike along the river was saved and the business survived. There is a funny side story to this. When the Secret Service took over our telephones, one agent tried to call Air Force One. He punched in the number, then said, "Hello? Is this Air Force One?" There was a pause, and then he said, "It's not?" He had misdialed the number. I would have liked to have seen the expression on the face of the person at the other end of that call. During the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, we continued to expand the Thin Bit line. In 1982, William Kaiser retired and I became president. Hazel Kaiser retired in 1986, and Doug Perry joined the company as vice president in 1987. By 1993, we had outgrown our Sherman Boulevard location. In February 1994, the business was moved to Centennial Industrial Park. In 1997, we introduced our website, thinbit.com. Ken King joined the company in July 1996. In 2006, he became an owner and is currently our chief operating officer.